Hello everyone, it's Laura Brazil of Mind Over Muscle, and today I'm talking about my personal red flag when I start walking. When I start walking more, this body part really speaks to me, and so it is my left hip, specifically my hip flexors and my IT band area. And so I'm going to walk through my thought process as I give this area a little TLC. And this may not be the area that flares up when you start walking more, but it should give you some insights of how you can start using some of the principles as a guide to address your own canary in the physical canary in the coal mine. Coal mine? No, the coal mine. So I'm going to be using a yoga tune-up ball. This is the plus ball. And I have two of them. I'm going to start with one. But you can just use a tennis ball or other squishy ball here. And I'm going to roll around the head of my femur. So I'm going to feel for the head of my femur and I'm going to roll around it. So I'm not going to roll directly on the bone here, but around it. Usually before a walk, I like to, if I have time, this doesn't happen every time, but if I have time and I know that I know that this is my trouble spot, I'll roll around the head of my femur. So I'm identifying the spot that is bothering me and I'm rolling it out. So that's kind of principle number one. So whatever your spot is, can you put pressure on it? Can you roll out? And you don't have to do this on the floor. Doing it on the wall, or even just if you have a really, really tight spot, just rubbing it out, even with your hands. You don't need necessarily a ball, but it can make a big difference in that tissue. So I usually would do that for about 2 minutes. And then, because I know this is a super tight spot, I've had people do this with 2 tennis balls or other squishy balls in a tube sock, so you don't have to have this specific setup. But I'll go down the front of my leg like so, and this is just, again, another rolling out tactic in a spot that I know is really tight for me. So I'll do that for 2 minutes. Just 2 different ways to put some touch and some pressure here. Again, this spot, I know that I can go down to the floor and put pressure on it like this with my full body weight on it. But for you, you might do it on the wall or someplace else. So rolling is where I start to just loosen things up and become aware of the tension that I'm feeling in certain spots. So we'll do that for 2 minutes as well. So you'll find things that work, that feel good for you. Then, if I'm before a walk, I like to roll, and then I like to do a little active motion. So I know I'm really tight here, so my hip tends to be flexed a lot, and I can't get it to extend super well. So I'm going to do an exercise to strengthen this muscle in the way that I want it to be longer. So I'm going to strengthen it as I lengthen this muscle. So I do a roll out, then I do the exercise. And I'm trying to strengthen my hip flexors as they lengthen. So I'm going to bring both my legs in. I'm going to straighten out my top leg. And then trying to keep this right leg in, I'm going to lower down nice and slow. So I'm lengthening these muscles here, but they're still working to hold up the leg. And then I might hold there. I can come up again. So I'm not so concerned about the leg lift portion of this. I'm concerned about the lowering portion. Nice and slow, keeping my leg in, keeping my pelvis tucked so that I can get a nice lengthening stretch and strengthen of my hip flexors here. Ooh. And I just would do 3 to 5 of these because it's tiring. If you've worked with me, you might know about the knee pit. So I'm going to rotate so that my knee pit is pointing that way, so my hip is in neutral, and do the same thing. That's going to work different muscle fibers. I'm trying to just move from the hip here and not let my spine move. All right, so now I've done my rolling and strengthening. At this point, I might head out for my walk. It's not a ton. It was less than 5 minutes. But I could also add in a bit of a stretch. So one of the ones that I like to do as an active stretch, because I would like to do active stretches before an activity. So I'm not doing like a long passive stretch here. I will work on tucking my tailbone under here and then pushing my pelvis forward so that I get more extension through the hip. And I might go back, come forward, go back, come forward. I'm getting a nice stretch, but I'm not spending too long on this stretch. It's a little bit more dynamic as I go. So if you do stretch before you start training, keep the stretch a little bit faster. You're not doing long holds because you want this muscle to be really able to produce a force producer when you go out. All right, so now let's say I'm done with my walk. I can come back to this stretch and tuck under, go forward, and do my hip flexor stretch here, but hold it longer because I'm done walking now. I can let it relax and really breathe and let go. So this is a stretch that I like both before and after, but I do them differently before the walk versus after the walk. Another one I really like for my hip flexor when it's being a little telling me things is this is getting a specific muscle that runs down the front of the leg, but it also runs across the front of the hip. So if I can grab, you might use a strap or a towel to grab your ankle. And so now I'm pulling this muscle by putting something under my hips here, my hip bones, and by keeping my knee on the ground as I do this, I am stretching, pulling this muscle from both ends. This is the rectus femoris, in case you're wondering. So I would hold this stretch longer after a walk. So more stretching takes place after a walk than before a walk. And then finally, I would go back to rolling out because I found rolling out to be really, really wonderful. So I can go back to those exact same rollouts that I was doing before. So one of them was here along the IT band. The IT band can get really tight when your hip flexors are really tight. So I roll out some more here. It feels very different than it did before I started this. And I'm really focusing again on those hip flexors, on the part of my hip. And I'm just, that is my warning signal. Like I've done too much. Especially with walking, I've walked too far, and I know this part of my hip, it doesn't extend very well, and the hip flexors are tight, and with that, it requires a little bit more TLC. So I hope this gave you, even though I was focused on my issue, I hope it gives you an insight of how you might address your issue. So before a walk, start with some rolling, start with some exercises that are going to strengthen and solidify the range of motion that the rolling and maybe the stretching that you did created. If you are stretching before you go out on a walk or whatever activity you're doing, keep the stretches a little bit more short and dynamic so that you're not having a too lax of a muscle before you go out into maybe take a walk or garden or whatever it may be. And then after you're done with your activity, you can do those longer stretches. You can roll out some more, maybe do a little breathing and relaxing. And then keep coming back to it. If this is the thing that keeps coming up for you, it probably needs attention a little bit every day. Goes a long way, and as much as you can, and as much as you can tolerate. But again, if you've worked with me before, you've heard me say there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. So find that balance for you. Even 5 minutes a day on what you know to be the trouble spot that crops up when you do things can go a long way. Let me know if you have questions. about how you might apply these principles to your own trouble spot. And if you are having trouble figuring it out, contact me. I'd love to help. All right, everyone, have a great day.